You ever wake up and your throat feels like sandpaper?
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah, we're talking dry throat today. And, we're diving into all those notes you sent over about it. This isn't just a quick drink some water situation for you, is it?
It's fascinating how often people just brush it off, right? Like it's no big deal. But you're onto something because it can be a real puzzle, and honestly,
Yeah,
it can be a sign of something else going on.
exactly. And it seems like you've been looking into, well, all the usual suspects: dehydration, dry air.
Yeah.
You even mentioned how much you've been using your voice. All great places to start.
Absolutely. But since we're going deep here, let's factor in your lifestyle too. All that travel you mentioned, long flights maybe, that dry cabin air can really mess with your throat, especially if you're not, consciously drinking enough water to compensate.
It's like our throats are total divas, the first to complain when we're even a little dehydrated.
They really are. And dehydration isn't just about being thirsty, which, by the way, I see you've got that flagged in your notes. Darker urine, feeling tired all the time, headaches even.
Right.
Those are not so subtle hints to drink more water.
Sometimes we need that little nudge to really listen to our bodies.
Right.
Right? And speaking of things that can make our throats feel like they're screaming for mercy, you mentioned something about crazy temperature swings where you live.
Oh, yeah. Those sudden changes, man, they do no favors for your throat. Your throat needs a certain moisture balance, right?
Right.
And those sudden blasts of AC on a scorching day or going from a warm building out into the cold,
Ugh, don't even remind me.
it throws everything off.
Yeah, it makes you realize just how delicate that whole system really is. And while we're in the subject of sensitive throats, I saw in your notes lots of presentations lately.
Oh, yeah.
I know you're not a simmer by trade or anything,
Right.
but all that talking, that's got to be tough on your vocal cords too, right?
Yeah, for sure. Think of it like any other muscle overuse equals fatigue. For you, those long presentations, even if it's just on the phone or video calls, they still make your vocal cords work overtime. And then, bam, dry, scratchy throat.
So we've got dehydration, dry air, overuse, all checked off the list. But you've also got this whole other thing about waking up with a dry throat. That's a clue that takes us a little deeper, don't you think?
Okay, so get ready to enter the fascinating world of, wait for it, breathing.
Here we go.
I know. It's something we do without thinking, right?
Right. But when it comes to a dry throat, how we breathe, well, it plays a bigger role than most people realize.
Huge. And this is where that whole waking up with a dry throat thing comes in.
Okay.
Because it could mean, are you ready for this? It could mean you're a mouth breather at night.
A mouth breather? I mean, it sounds kind of funny.
It does, yeah.
But when your mouth's open all night, it's basically a desert wind blowing across your throat all night long.
Exactly. Moisture is just evaporating nonstop.
No wonder you wake up feeling like you swallowed a cotton ball.
Exactly. And here's the thing. Mouth breathing, especially during sleep, it can sometimes be a sign of something else going on, like sleep apnea, for instance.
Sleep apnea. I feel like a lot of us have heard of it, but do we really understand it? Maybe not.
It's actually more common than people realize. Basically, it's when your breathing repeatedly stops and starts throughout the night because your airway gets blocked. And guess what usually happens when you can't breathe?
You open your mouth to gasp for air.
Exactly.
So the dry throat, it's like a breadcrumb leading to a whole other mystery.
It's a clue.
Right. And speaking of mysteries, we got to talk allergies. Because you mentioned those in your notes too, and that's a whole other category where it's like, is it this or is it that?
Right.
It's so tricky. Is it a cold or are my allergies flaring up? From your notes, sounds like you've got dust mites, pet dander, pollen. The gang's all here.
They're everywhere. But seriously, how can we tell? Allergies versus just a plain old cold.
Details, my friend. Details. With allergies, you'll probably have those itchy, watery eyes and those sneezing fits that just won't quit.
A cold, you're more likely to have a stuffy or runny nose and maybe even a fever. And that you usually don't get with allergies.
Right. Okay, so we've got dehydration, dry air, overuse, the whole mouth breathing situation, and those tricky allergies. Whew.
I know.
It's a lot, but we're in this together, right? And we're not letting you navigate this dry throat maze without talking about some of the more serious stuff. Because as much as we love a good home remedy, sometimes our bodies are trying to tell us they need a little extra help.
100%. Sometimes that dry throat is a sign that it's time to bring in the professionals.
Time to see a doctor.
Exactly.
And we don't want to scare anyone.
No.
But it's important to know what those red flags are so we can take action if we need to.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the biggest ones is when that dry throat is actually like the opening act for a full-blown infection. You know, those party crashers we all know and love. viruses and bacteria.
Oh, they love a good throat party, don't they? And those infections, they can range from annoying to, let's be honest, kind of scary.
Yeah, we're talking the common cold, the flu, strep throat, even COVID can start with a scratchy, dry throat.
It's like our bodies have a limited vocabulary when it comes to warning signals, and sore throat. That's like the universal sign. But you mentioned something earlier about how a sore throat often starts with dryness.
Uh-huh.
I feel like that's a big clue.
Huge clue. Often that dry, scratchy feeling, that's the first sign your throat is irritated and something is brewing.
Yeah, yeah.
And let's be real, sometimes a sore throat feels like you're swallowing glass.
Not fun.
Not fun at all.
Yeah.
No.
So if that dry throat is hanging around, or it's like inviting other friends over like a fever, those swollen glands you mentioned, or you just feel plain awful, it's time to seek professional help.
100%.
Oh.
And speaking of things that can make your throat feel like a battleground,
Yeah.
we have to address the elephant in the room. Or should I say, the acid in the throat.
GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease.
There you go.
It's a mouthful, literally.
It is a mouthful, literally, and it's not a pleasant experience. So basically, GARD is like stomach acid sneaks back up your esophagus into your throat. It's like, imagine a bad house guest. But this house guest is also a pyromaniac, just leaving a trail of burning and irritation.
So no.
Right, and you guessed it.
Yeah.
That often leads to a very unhappy, dry throat.
Going through your notes, you mentioned a burning sensation, especially after meals or before bed. Does that sound familiar?
Oh, interesting. You've really been doing your homework.
Yeah.
That burning, my friend. Telltale sign of GERD.
Yeah. We're not saying that's what it is, but it's definitely something to consider as we move into the solutions part of our deep dive. So we've covered a lot about dry throat, everything from the usual suspects to some pretty surprising causes. But I think we can both agree that the most important part is figuring out what to do about it.
Absolutely. And the good news is a lot of the solutions are things you can easily work into your daily life.
Like the advice we probably all got growing up, right? Drink plenty of fluids.
Sounds simple, but stay hydrated. Honestly, it's the foundation. And we're not just talking plain water, although that's always a winner. You mentioned you enjoy herbal teas.
Yeah.
Great choice. Super soothing. Especially if you had a little honey.
Honey, right. It's like the OG of home remedies. I remember reading in one of those articles that it has antimicrobial properties.
It does. It's true. Honey can actually soothe your throat and fight off those pesky germs at the same time.
Yeah.
And hey, while we're at it, don't forget about zinc lozenges.
Oh, yeah.
Zinc can be really good for calming down those irritated mucous membranes.
Okay, those are great for when you're like just starting to feel that dryness.
Yeah.
But what about those times when you're like full-on sandpaper throat?
Eh.
You sound like a broken record player.
Oh, we got you. Over-the-counter stuff like those throat sprays or lozenges that have pectin or slippery elm,
Yeah.
they can really coat and soothe things. And if you think allergies are the culprit, an antihistamine could be a lifesaver.
Right. Sometimes you just need a little extra help. But before we wrap up, we got to circle back to those red flags. Because as much as we love a good home remedy, sometimes it's time to call in the professionals.
100%, yeah. Those teas, the honey, over-the-counter stuff, they work wonders for a lot of people. But sometimes, your gut's telling you something's up. That's when you listen to your body.
And see a doctor.
Exactly.
Like if that dry throat is just hanging around for too long, or if you've got a fever, those swollen glands we talked about, or anything else that's just feeling off, don't mess around.
Listen to your body. You know it best.
Well, we've covered so much ground today, and honestly, I feel like we've given our listeners a lot to think about.
We did it.
We started with, why is my throat dry? And now we've got like a whole roadmap. We know what to look for, what to try, and when to get help.
Love it. And as you continue on your dry throat journey, here's a question to ponder. Why do you think, as a society, we tend to ignore or downplay this symptom so much? It's so common, yet we often try to just power through it.
That is such a good question. It's like we've almost been trained to ignore those little signs our bodies are sending. But hey, that's a conversation for another deep dive. Until then, stay hydrated, everyone. Listen to your body. And don't hesitate to reach out to a healthcare professional if you need to. You've got this.